order the meeting of the planning board for July 24th, 2024. Alphabetical roll call.
Clark Brewer here.
Tom Callahan here.
Amy Glassmeyer here.
Kevin Hein, present.
Okay, all right, so we don't have any hearings. I'll try to keep it short. Our first order of business, we have to formally vote.
Can you talk to the mic directly?
I am talking to the mic directly. We have to formally vote to have Amy be our representative to the Community Preservation Committee, so I would move for her appointment as our representative.
Second that.
Okay, any discussion? All in favor? Thank you, Amy, for volunteering.
Clark Brewer, aye.
Tom Callahan, aye.
Kevin Hein, aye.
Did I vote?
Yeah, you can vote first.
Amy, aye. If you have any, if anybody has any insights about how to be a good member on that committee, appreciate it.
You know,
I think
I don't think-
Mary Ann has put together like a cheat sheet on what's fundable and what isn't, and what the kind of regulations and requirements are. And Tom is a very, I think, reasonable, broad-minded person. So I think you're going to be with a good group.
Great.
Oh, who's the chair now?
Tom Reardon.
Oh, okay, yeah. Yeah, what you can fund is greatly expanded from when it originally was passed 20 years ago, but you know, I don't think you're going to get involved with too many zoning or planning related issues. It's just really offering your opinion and insights on what's a good expenditure of taxpayer money or not. I only remember in the early days when the senior center folks first came to us, they came to us with no plans, no idea what to do, and just threw out a $2 million. Hey, just give us $2 million. And I know since then, the committee has been very exacting on it, making sure people come with very detailed proposals, you know, so I think you'll enjoy it. It's a different perspective than just doing this stuff. But, all right, our second order of business isn't on the agenda, but the town manager has asked if there is interest in updating, emphasize the word updating, not redo, the master plan, which was passed, what, 2018?
That sounds about right. Yeah, 2018,
Yeah, so
2019.
it's probably due for a look over, and
2019.
19,
Just about, almost 5 years ago, not quite.
Yeah, we're about halfway through. The reason that he's asking is that the open space and rec plan is going to be expiring and need to be redone for 2026.
Yeah.
So we're going to be looking at all of the other plans to see if there's any way that if we're going to go forward for funding to do the open space and rec plan to kind of combine them if we're going to be updating any of the other plans.
That's right. The open space plan is a prerequisite to comply with community preservation. Master plan doesn't have any kind of requirement like that.
But that doesn't preclude us from actually doing that, does it, Clark?
No, not
Yeah.
at all. Actually,
No, certainly
I
not.
don't know anything about it, so I'm asking.
we should have one. We should have one.
Master plans are good for 10 years.
Yeah.
The last one was good for 15.
Well, that one wasn't officially passed, but
Yes. Well, yes, the 2004 one wasn't officially passed. So
Right.
the 2019 one is the only one we have.
Clark and I and others made sure that a lot of what was in the 2004 one actually was brought forward for ideas and passage into new laws. But I think
Amy has a question.
can I just say quickly, is the review of all these plans also going to include the harbor plan?
Sure.
Yeah, it can.
Yeah, okay.
We were looking at the harbor plan, the hazard mitigation plan, the open space and rec plan, and the master plan.
Okay. Amy, go ahead.
Do you think that, with Chris's question, do you think that he will provide the resources to update the statistical analysis? And the reason that I say that is that COVID had a lot of consequences for communities, and we don't really have a take, I think, on that. And I think it would be useful for us to have that. I think another issue that we didn't really take up in the master plan that I was involved with is the composition of children going to school and what the future of the student population is going to be. As we have been said in several of the open town hall meetings, there's a desire on the parts of parents to have somebody start to talk about a renovation or a complete new building of schools, and we can't do that if we don't have the statistics behind it. And we certainly can't qualify for the state school funding if we don't have a good handle on what's actually happening. And in our particular case, there's some really interesting dynamics, and it's too bad that Deidre isn't here, because we have a changing population of children in the town that have consequences for what the budget's going to look like.
Oh, I can assure you that the school department studies this stuff and projects. I think what maybe
Sure.
needs to be done is that the master plan has to be much more comprehensive than just a zoning and development kind of thing, and include some other things, and maybe the school department's work product has to be appended to it. But I imagine, like with the previous master plans, passed and not passed, that a separate committee to work on this will be set up. And the planning board ultimately is responsible for it and making sure it quote unquote passes and becomes effective. But
Well, we could sure use some of the residential patterns analysis that was referenced in the master plan. So I think there's some subtasks that could be done. I speaking from personal experience, putting together a new master plan 5 years later that got passed a couple of months before COVID hit is a lot of work.
Yeah.
And I'd like to see the follow-up on the subtasks that were referenced first.
I take Chris's request as being are we interested in updating it, not rewriting it? So
Correct.
I think the short answer to his question is yes, the planning board is interested in it. Let's develop this further. If it's simply the planning board that's going to do this on its own, fine, well, we're going to need resources, we're going to need help, but I think they're going to need to set up a committee like was done before to work on the updates and then present it to the board when they're ready to do that.
So I think that given how the census has been evolving and the federal government statistical capabilities of data collection have changed dramatically, and in lots of different ways that people that don't deal with it all the time might not know. But we have greater specificity. We have annual updates to time series that allow us to make rather precise projections about what's happening. So and MAPC has as one of its mandates to provide locations that don't have the capacity to do it all on their own to actually be of help. And so I think that since we had MAPC help us to begin with, and we had a couple of other consultants that we could actually approach, I think, as well, is that we should, I guess I sort of see between Tom and Clark's comments, let's not do everything. Let's do things that matter, and let's do things that combine.
Again,
Sure.
the purpose of this discussion is not to discuss how the thing will be updated. That'll be later. It's just a simple, yes or no, are we interested in pursuing it? And the answer, I think we all agree is yes, so. Cassandra, you can take that to the powers that be and.
Yep.
If you're gonna seek grant money to help support this, with all the plans being done, updated at the same time, great. But, when the time comes and there is a committee created to do the updates, you would expect that this board should probably have two members on that, two members participate, since.
Yes, I'm sure when the time
Ultimately,
comes.
ultimately, this board's responsible for the master plan, so we should be involved in that, in the putting the updates together. And then Amy, your points about what should be updated and how we get data to do that would be brought to the forefront, so. Okay, all right, so then that's that. We don't have any minutes to do we?
No, the minutes from your last meeting, I'm gonna have ready for August 14th.
All right, so tonight the purpose was just to start to briefly discuss the zoning bylaw amendments. It's replacing the bylaw committee. Regarding the idea of compiling everything into regulations into one space. Let me just share that screen. This is just the outline document. I circulated a memo finally to all the other board chairs of the land use boards, just to introduce the idea to them and see if there's any problems with it. I had asked the select board to get guidance from town council on how this gets done. I don't imagine there's any magic problems or of just simply taking everybody's regulations and putting them in one place, but as is currently the case, each board will be responsible for any amendments and changes to their own regulations. We are going to need to do some in preparation for the fall town meeting. With our regulations and just maybe reorganizing what we have and bringing on some new material related to two of the zoning articles. So, we'll schedule a public hearing sometime in the fall to do that and hopefully have the regs that we need to do in place before the town meeting comes forward, and whenever it's going to be, November, December. Is there any other comments, thoughts about the regulation idea?
I actually just have a small comment that I heard from Chris today that special town meeting is going to be December 9th.
Oh, boy. Okay.
Just to put that all on your
Yeah,
calendars.
so that'll give us a time frame for everything similar to what we had last fall. So that's good.
Has the dates been backed out for the final deadline for printing the warrant and then selectmen approval and then planning board public hearings and
Yeah,
notice and all
um,
that stuff?
I got a draft from Tracy this afternoon on those dates. I don't know that they're set in stone at this point. I think that they're fairly set in stone. So
Sure, close.
I was gonna work tomorrow on kind of creating a draft schedule for you guys for
Okay.
the important dates that you would need to hit.
Yeah.
Great.
Last year, when it was December 5th, I believe we had our section 5 hearings in mid-October, so that's probably where we'll do that. Unless we break it up too, like tonight, there's a couple of things that I think are no-brainers, and I don't know how far out we're allowed to do a section 5 hearing, but we'll have time for all of this. So
Hey, has anybody else been getting a lot of spam calls lately
about,
about it? I don't know, everything, it seems like.
Oh.
When my
Yeah,
phone says spam, I don't answer it, but geez.
I have heard
I-
that there's been an uptick in those recently.
Yeah, I can attest to that.
How do you,
You
How do you
can,
fix
you
that?
can get a piece of software from your telephone service that put a robot on that type of spam, and it will actually answer it. The spam will answer, or the robot will answer it first and ask a question of whatever is being what the phone call is for, and then you can either choose to listen to it or not.
All right, thanks. I'll check.
Yeah, I find that I'm getting a lot of spam emails, and I may have been hacked a week or so ago, but not, not debilitating my emails, but I'm just getting a lot of people who are liking stuff and trying to friend me,
Well, you're becoming a Facebook maven, I guess.
Yeah, yeah. Or people think I'm some rich old man. It's more like it, but anyway, they're gonna be,
I get those too, Tom, and they get blocked. The real.
oh yeah, I
reason.
blocked them all, but they would be sorely disappointed if they think I'm some rich sugar daddy for them, but anyway, we digress. So let's go just to look at the overview of the articles. So there is a list of 9 here to finish up what's been untouched by all the other previous amendments. This first 2, I'd like to just get out of the way. I discussed this with the subcommittee of the Alternative Energy Committee, but it's the idea to, both of those articles were written, bylaws were written long ago by people who didn't know about bylaw writing and who I don't think consulted with anybody on the planning board at the time on writing them. They're incredibly long, incredibly overly detailed. And the point of both the wind and solar amendments, the major point, is to take stuff out of it, like application procedures and shutdown procedures, and some really technical stuff that might change over time as technology changes and science changes. Get them out of the bylaw, put them in regulations, and there's so much more easily amended to deal with changes in procedures, technology, what have you. So what's before you is PB1, is the reform of the wind bylaw, which is now section 310.1, and then PB2 is the solar. The substantive changes we needed to make to solar energy bylaws were done last fall as part of Article 4. You may recall the judge said, the Attorney General's office was pretty hot to trot on certain provisions regarding solar energy that needed to be in our uses sections of our bylaw. We did that. So what's before you with these 2 amendments has really no substantive change whatsoever. I'm pointing to this page. One of my ideas was right here. Was, the only thing we regulate on wind turbines is really large turbines, like the ones that exist in town that are over 500 kilowatt generation. We don't allow anything smaller than that on a smaller scale. And that was the thought behind these 2 sections here. In discussing this with the Alternative Energy Committee, though, I guess these types of regulations are just not ready to be passed yet because the technology just isn't there to encourage widespread, individual building size or campus building size uses. So what we do is put these 2 sections in and say they're reserved for the future, and as the technology allows for more feasible development of these things on a smaller scale, we can certainly add them to the bylaw. On the
Tom, can I ask a question? Which is, since we cannot currently test the technology that is coming down the pike, I don't know if it's a good idea to think about the future and then incorporate it as if it might be, because you don't know what's going to happen. And since the Energy Committee is itself saying that we shouldn't really do it, why don't we just not do it?
Yeah, but they didn't have a problem with doing this and reserving sections for the future. It's basically there so that it's in writing in front of everybody's face to keep thinking about it and keep keeping on top of the technology to see if we can add something. I mean, if we're
It-
gonna go to alternative energies in this country, my personal belief is that we have to look at anything and everything. And we
Right.
live in a very windy area, and, so wind power, even on a smaller scale, could have its value. It's just that, I guess, these small scale turbines that you pop on your house or you pop on a pole in your yard are, at the moment, prohibitively expensive, so.
Well, but it's way beyond that. It's the fact that you're going to get into environmental regulations, wildlife regulations, systems which are in conflict, perturbations in the energy system. I think we should, we have excellent people working on that, but I think we want to look at this really carefully because it's more than just they're expensive. There's a whole lot of conflict within the system of energy generation and storage.
Which is why we're not gonna pass any regulation. I mean, I had written something and, they just said, fine, but it's just not feasible that anybody will ever do this. At the current time, nobody would ever do this. And the idea, remember, one of the changes we did make to the solar bylaw last fall was formally allowing in the bylaw that individual scale solar panels on individual houses. It was allowed by the building department, but it wasn't actually allowed in the bylaw. So the thought here was just to prepare for the same type of use of wind energy on a smaller scale as we have for solar. But, again, F and G here, do they have to be there? No, but it's just, we can tack them on in the end whenever we're ready. I'm not gonna.
Excuse me, Tom.
Yeah.
I think what you've done makes sense here. I'm not sure if reserved is the right terminology. Reserved for future, maybe, or something.
That is in law, in statute and regulation writing, that's the term used for something that
Reserved,
you're putting in as a placeholder for some future.
reserved, but not allowed. I mean, if you're going to put something in the bylaw,
Well,
you want to
again,
make it clear to lay.
I know lawyers know that, but.
It would be
I mean, I
great
can
if
add, yeah, I can
it
add
was
that.
clear to lay people,
I
'cause
know, well. okay, that's-
even if it's a term of art, you could put in parentheses something like not currently allowed.
Yeah,
Or do whatever sounds.
yeah, I mean, yeah, I hear what you're saying, so let me just make a note about that. All right, and then I also just added so that everybody could see it. It won't be in the warrant, obviously. But this is all the text that would be moved out of the wind bylaw, and then it follows for the solar bylaw, the kind of stuff that would be moved into regulations so that these kinds of technological and application requirements that may change with technology and cost can more easily be amended as needed, as opposed to having them in the bylaw. It's just, they're all taking up an enormous amount of space in the bylaw that they don't need to take up, so. So again, I discussed this with the subcommittee that the Alternative Energy Committee set up to work on this, and I think they're comfortable with all of this right now, so I just want to, unless anybody has any giant objections to it, just put these aside and move on.
You may not be able to see it because you're multitasking, but Kevin's had his hand raised for a
Oh,
bit.
I'm sorry, I apologize. Kevin, go ahead. Kevin?
Or maybe he forgot that his hand is raised. But it is.
Sorry, I'm talking into a muted mic.
Okay.
I'll lower the hand, but you sent a second set saying it was a correction to the first set you had shared a few days ago out today.
Oh, yeah, I apparently by mistake, I attached the lineup of articles for last spring. This is the lineup for the fall.
Okay,
That
so
was
I
my-
took an opportunity to do a quick read through it, and I noticed there were some red strikeouts and edits and such, and that was your edits, Tom, or your committee's edits?
In which,
different-
well, right now, for the purpose of the 1 and 2, those are the final, I mean, again, there's no text changes to the bylaws that exist today. It's just moving.
All right, well, let me just say.
Yeah, no, but I
maybe-
mean, in some of the later ones that we'll get to in a moment, yes, there are text changes that I have made, and or like in the next bylaw, MAPC is made, so.
So then it may be existing text. I just saw a typo there's a section 5, financial surety for LGT installations,
Yeah.
point A.
Yeah,
And there's just, the two words have been swapped. It doesn't read correct.
all
An
right,
applicant for LGT installation shall provide a form of financial surety acceptable to the town to cover cost decommissioning of, it should be decommissioning costs of the LGT installation.
all right, I'll find that, I'll go through, but these were, I could assure you, these were all cut and pastes from the existing bylaw, so the typo probably exists in the existing bylaw, but,
And then in
Anyway.
PB3, which you didn't start talking about, I just had a point that I think needs a clarification in that.
yeah, okay, all right, so PB3 is the changes that are going to be done to our floodplain overlay district bylaw, which is, I believe it was Article 14, now it's section 9.4. MAPC is going to deal with this, is the one writing this, and MAPC is going to present the final draft on August 14th, at our meeting on August 14th. We have a couple of hearings that night as well. But they made a presentation to me, Cassandra, and I forget who else was there. And what is in front of you is their edit. Now put into the new section 9.4, the organization that we moved, moved the bylaw. The bottom line on this one is that apparently the state has a new model bylaw on floodplain districts. Everybody's supposed to comply with it. And our existing bylaw, because you can see by the small number of red edits, was pretty close to being compliant with this model bylaw. So this is really just a lot of housekeeping changes that are necessary at this point. And they'll explain it more. But this is one that we're going to need to do to comply with the state's requirements. And seems to be a no-brainer that our existing bylaw was pretty good to begin with. So is there a particular question you had?
Yeah, is that directed to me?
Yeah, Kevin, I'm sorry.
Yeah, the PB3B location has a strikeout of the 100-year. And in lieu of it, it has the 1% chance using lieu of 100-year.
Yeah, well,
So,
yeah, well, leave that, when they're here on the 14th, they can explain that.
well,
When they
common
present,
terminology is 100
yeah,
year.
no, I know, and then there's I'm sure that when they presented this to Cassandra and I, they basically showed us a chart that had, one side our bylaw, the other side, what little changes needed to be made. We didn't get into the weeds about why some of these changes in terminology were needed, other than the broad explanation that it's complying with the state model bylaws. So save that
Well, the
question.
whole thing talks about 100-year, and then in this part of it, point B flips it by getting rid of 100-year and using 1% chance. And you should just stick with the 100-year, and that's what the common terminology is.
Yeah,
And
all
that's
right,
what it
well,
should be.
make sure you remember that question for the 14th, because that needs to go to them.
And the other point is, it just ties into this, is further text talks about in the definitions, and it says definitions not found in state building code, and it's flood boundary and floodway map. And it talks about the official map community issued by FEMA that depicts based on detailed analysis the boundaries of the 100-year and 5-year floodplain and the 100-year floodway.
Yeah.
Further discussion in these regulations talks about a 2021, I believe, 100-year floodplain map. And that's used as a reference, and that's what is used now. But that's subject to future revisions, and I don't see a combination of that. In a definition like this floodplain and floodway map, flood boundary and floodway map. It's got to also say, it has to accommodate that if you're referencing the 2021, that there's going to be updates to that, and we're still not going to be referencing the 2021 when a new one comes out, say in 2026 or 2030.
Yeah, right, well, that's easily done by, as found in statutes all the time, as, as amended or as amended.
Well, that's right, but I never saw any of that in any of this language.
Yeah, all
So-
right, no, but again, just if you could make the note, remember to ask that question so we can make these changes while we're sitting here on the 14th.
Yep.
Okay. So that one, since MAPC is the author, is going to be hopefully just another easy one to just deal with. I'm going to skip this one for the next part. The mitigation bylaw we talked about, which would be PB5, that will plug into the new Article 11, which the new Article 11 uses the word reserved because it's reserved for something new to be stuck into it. I've asked town council to write that one based on the critique of my attempt to cohasitize other towns' bylaws. There aren't many other towns that have anything like this. I borrowed a little from Hanover. I think the problem of Hanover has too many dollar figures stated into it, which are probably way under what they should be. And when we were dealing with Black Horse Lane, that was kind of thrown in our face. When the applicant was trying to tell us what the per foot cost of a roadway was. And then Dedham has a provision, but it applies to their, very, very large projects like the Dedham Mall and things along Route 1. So it was not easy as a first draft of trying to take that Dedham one and make it applicable to Cohasset, but the overall objective of this is to set something in place that when we have some large projects and, as a practical matter, that'll be projects on 3A and maybe under the MBTA district, that we have some form of mitigation of infrastructure. And again, we are stuck with that. We can't overtly hit a development for the costs of added school children, but, there may be other ways around that. So I asked town council to write it. I hope, I haven't got an answer if they've been officially engaged to do it, but, they have a time request of getting this to us by September. So if anyone here, though, would like to take a stab at creating a Cohasset mitigation development impact bylaw, I can send you my draft. I can send you the Dedham bylaw. I can send you the Hanover bylaw, and, feel free. I've taken my stab at it. I'm not going to do another one. So,
Tom, I actually had a brief conversation with Carolyn today in regards to this. They are willing to take a stab at it, but since there are, different bylaws that are out there, that it could be modeled after. Before they went ahead and just plugged in, she asked that the board kind of more define the scope of how they would like it to be written, if at all possible. That way they could have kind of a direction that the board would want them to go in.
I have a question.
Before we discuss that, yeah, I saw your hand up, Amy. Go ahead.
Thanks, Tom. I think we ought to look around the entire local government apparatus and make a committee that has been discussing this set of issues for the last 5 years. I mean, there's people on the Concom that have been thinking about it. There's people in DPW that have been thinking about it. There's people even at the schools. We've got a lot of potential capacity. And we ought to try to get the very best capability so that we don't do it more than once, and then we do it really well when we do it.
That's fine. I mean, one of the reasons of getting town council to do this is they're much more in a position to survey other communities, and I can tell you that Hanover is the only local one that has anything like this. And then again, Dedham. Braintree doesn't, and Braintree has a lot of large development, but they don't have anything. I guess.
Plymouth doesn't have anything, Tom?
I'm sorry?
Plymouth doesn't have anything?
I don't believe so. I don't know if I looked at Plymouth. Plymouth has a lot of interesting things, but I'm
Nope.
not sure that it does.
This is
But
a
here's-
good
no.
situation to use AI and see whether or not
Here's-
you can pull up that information
Sc-
from the the scrambled eggs that comes out of AI. I mean,
Don't get me going about AI, but here's what based on your suggestion, here's what I'll do and what town council is asking. Is I will circulate a memo tomorrow to all the other town departments. And if anybody has thoughts, and including the members of this committee, this board, you have thoughts on what it is we would want to be mitigated and what impacts we would be trying to address, that would be the first thing. And the second part of the equation is where is the trigger? Are we triggering just commercial development and mixed use development? Are we somehow going to request a very large home, single family home to create mitigation? If we deal with a residential subdivision, our residential subdivision rules and regs already allow us to deal with impacts to a certain extent. So I'll circulate that and we can gather a town opinion, but we are on a tight time schedule, and we can certainly tell town council what it is we're trying to prioritize. The Dedham one does talk a lot about costs, about offsetting added costs to the town. And there's almost an implication that could apply to schools, but Carolyn has told us otherwise on numerous occasions, and the Judge Cutler as well, that we cannot regulate to offset the impact of added children to the schools, at least not overtly. We can require sidewalks, roadway, water, sewer, infrastructure improvements, maybe, contributions to a fund, for a future fire station if one might be needed, that kind of thing. But we can't deal with, which is the biggest fiscal impact of town, is because the project generates kids. So I won't do it tonight to keep this meeting short, but I'll circulate something so that everybody can give their input on what they think is important to address in this article. And I'll show you, I'll circulate with that my effort to cohesitize something, and you can just see where that was coming from and what kind of things were addressed. It was largely the end product was largely taken from Dedham's bylaw, but again, Dedham's only applies to their large scale projects. All right. So we have 2 articles that are pretty much done, 2 that are being written by outside people. PB4 is a proposal to amend the land alteration bylaw. PB6. Oh, did I get the numbers all out of whack? I think I did. Yeah, PB6 would be, again, to go back to the floor area ratio discussion we had last spring. We had put off, and I think this was by vote of the bylaw committee, the discussion of changing any frontage in order to look at it in conjunction with looking at the residential cluster bylaw, which is really only going to apply when we have subdivisions. Clark, what's the trigger of the residential cluster? 5 lots or more? I think
It's gotta be
5.
10 acres. It's a
5
10 acre
lots.
minimum in RA and RB only.
Yeah.
But hey, you didn't say much about RB 4 through 8 or 4 through 7.
I haven't yet. I'm just.
okay, were you
just
gonna go
look-
back to those or?
Yeah, well, I think for tonight, I'd like to discuss.
It would just be good to know what you're thinking about
No,
changing.
I don't want to, I don't think tonight we need to go through all of them, discuss in great detail all of them. So 1, 2 are pretty much done, the wind and solar. 3 is MAPC, 5 is town council. So those are, out off our plate at the moment. This one is the land alteration thing. Now, I have had this idea since the beginning of the bylaw committee and the working group before it. It hasn't really been brought forward as to be on any of the lineups for the previous town meetings. If you recall, you want a little history, there was an attempt to do this back in the mid-2000s as an offshoot of that master plan in 2004. There was a citizens petition in 2017. And some form of land alteration was passed in the mid-2000s. And then 2017, there was a citizens petition to amend it. It passed, but fell 6 short of the 2/3 vote. And then in 2018, there was an amendment that I believe Clark and I worked on to get into its current form. And Katie Dugan was a big author of the current form because she likes to use references to these, the assessor classifications, blah, blah, blah.
What's different about?
All right, well, first of all, one of the things was to put in, if you recall, we haven't dealt with this bylaw very much, although, there's that house that's being built now near Cunningham Bridge. That I guess we must have approved that. It was like something like 9,000 square feet, and there's ledge being blasted all over the place.
I know, but did we approve that? That's the really big
Well,
question.
again, one of my concerns about the ledge bylaw is that
It doesn't work.
it's not being enforced by the building.
Well, it's hard.
That's a concern, and then we also know that from Amy's side of town for the last year and a half, 2 years, there's been a lot of development up there, a lot of ledge blasting, and a lot of complaints about the ledge blasting. So, and I'm glad Birgit is here because her memo earlier today that she sent, I think reflects a lot of the sentiment that we've been hearing from people who have been complaining about the blasting. But to answer Clark's question is, the first thing, I'm trying to find where I put it. Oh, here. The one time we did deal with this at the Actors Row House. You may recall they proposed to remove some exposed ledge, and the bylaw is only designed to protect ledge that we already can see because that's part of the visual character of the town, the unique visual character, blah, blah, blah. And they proposed to remove some ledge to put a pool house. And then I think it was the applicant's proposal that we could expose some ledge in another spot to make up for it.
Yeah, that was on Gleason.
Yeah,
And they never did it. They never even renovated the place.
well, at least not yet. It's the same theory as wetlands replication that are in our wetlands regs. If you fill in a wetland, you have to replace that by creating a new wetland. And in their case, it's a 2-to-1 ratio. So we did that, and we adopted that in a decision. And it's right here in this section here of making it now a requirement of the bylaw rather than just some policy we adopted for one project. But the biggest thing is, the objective here is to get back closer to the original 2017 citizens proposal, although it's not exact, and to eliminate some of the exemptions. Okay, so in a nutshell, we allow ledge removal for construction, exposed ledge, again, exposed, for the primary structure, for utilities, and for accessory structures, including driveways and garages and stuff, pools. And then this was something that I remember the discussion back in 2017. We exempted the really small lots from this bylaw at all. And, a lot of these exemptions were put in as compromises to get the thing passed. And in retrospect, since we got a majority that just failed 2/3 by 6 votes, I wondered if we were okay and were overestimating what the opposition would be to this. But anyway, the idea here in a nutshell, and you can read the fine print, is to eliminate the exemptions of all lot, basically make this apply to all lots. And number two is take away the exemptions for basically the accessory structures and leave it in place for the main structure and utilities, necessary utilities. That's the overall objective of all this. We can now. Birgit had mentioned, in her memo, comparing this to trees grow back. We can easily, like we do with wetlands, say if you take out a tree, put another one back. You can't do that with ledge, although,
Right.
This attempt here is an attempt to do that, and we did apply that to Actors Row. I assume in Actors Row that the ledge that was underground was not very far underground, and it was easy to do. It was scraping off a few inches of topsoil to expose some ledge. In other places, maybe that's not going to be as easy. And Birgit, you correct me if I'm wrong, but summarizing your memo, her other thought was that to perhaps find ways to discourage removing ledge altogether by working with the landscape rather than trying to engineer the landscape. And then we don't have to get into how much ledge you're removing and how much you have to replace. And we don't have to get into exemptions. The trick there is, how do we do that?
So I'd like to comment on that.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
Standpoint of professional association with these kinds of dilemmas. First off, we have a lot of people in town that are actually landscape oriented, and they've dealt with very complex systems. And we should reach out to them and really, we never asked anybody, and it's not our fault. It's not a bad thing. We didn't know, but we ought to actually ask, what is the state of the art about how do you manage complex landscapes like we have? Because there are other parts of the country that have granite settings. They have all these complexities that really some places have managed it, and some places have had to be managed by it. And so that's one thing. The second thing is that there's a gigantic architectural and landscape community here in this region that is looking to change the way things are being done. And it's not that hard for us as the planning board. And some of it is because I teach in the School of Architecture and Planning at MIT. I have the ability to go to people and say, would you come for 30 minutes? Would you be on these things? And if we really want to do something that is durable, correct, and maybe even revolutionary, we should take advantage of the human resources we have access to. I mean, I'm looking at Kevin. Kevin is a geologist and a hydrogeologist, and he deals with complex environments that fall apart and get really, who's going to rebuild these places. And so I think if we want to make it, if we want to be serious about this and not feel like we're being pushed around and told what to do, we have to engage the professional community to help us set standards.
Clark, let me ask you as an architect. I mean, the reason, I mean, the reason to obviously remove underground ledge is to get a utility pipe in, a septic system, you know, well, not a septic system, but, you know, or a basement to a house. But, you know, I mean, we all know there's older houses that are built on tops of ledge, and you see the ledge in their basement, or
Yeah, I've got one of
is
them.
there,
I have one of them in my basement.
right,
That's
and
all
is
my
there,
basement is a
some,
rock.
is there some reason why the mentality is such that, you know, we have to blast things away, and why can't, you know, as
More
opposed
square
to,
footage,
Well,
more money.
Tom, the reality is it's like having a tree that you have to work around. The same problems with ledge, and the structural engineers that I work with will tell me, you know, you can pin to ledge, but you have to be able to pin your entire foundation, or else you have a hard spot if you have partly on ledge, partly not on ledge, that can create failure in foundation systems. So that's sort of one of the main considerations, is to make a level playing ground that you don't have a foundation failure if you use the ledge. Yeah, you could creatively design using ledge as your foundation system and save money on footings, but it's fussy and it's not standard.
yeah.
And that's what makes it more expensive, even if it's simpler and it saves materials.
Well, to Birgitte's point about encouraging this, you know, simply putting in words, we encourage you to do this. I mean, there's other parts of the bylaw where we say that, and, you know, great, but it's not binding. You know, with like the cluster bylaw, the typical approach to getting a desired result, which, you know, in subdivisions is to have more open space, is to give people an incentive, i.e. a density bonus, if they provide a certain amount of open space. So I'm wondering if the incentive, you know, do we build in an incentive here to preserve the existing ledge landscape as much as possible by incentivizing it and saying, you know, for example, if we, you know, we determine that the FAR, you know, we go to FAR and we say the FAR for this particular lot is going to be this, well, you can exceed that by 10%, 15%. You know, in other words, have a bigger house, as long
Yeah.
as you do it in such a tasteful way that you're not.
We've talked about this, and
Yeah.
it's just a little more, it's a little bit more complicated, but
Yeah.
a bit density bonus concept for preservation of whatever it is, ledge or landscape, or um I think it's possible. It's just figuring it all out so that
Yeah.
it's.
Because I think that's the only way a bylaw can put some teeth to a policy it's trying to encourage.
Well, you're talking about a carrot instead of a stick, because right now what you've got is all stick.
Well, no, we don't, because we have a giant exemption to basically do whatever the hell you want for not only the primary structure, but for the accessory structures. And, you know, there's nothing in the bylaw right now that incentivizes not blasting the hell out of everything in order to put in a regular foundation and a big basement. Yeah. I don't know. We're brainstorming tonight. I want to brainstorm on this one.
Kevin's got his hand up.
Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think I just want to add, you know, I think the key point is the terminology that we're using with regard to ledge, and that it has
I'm sorry, you froze up.
exposed.
You
And if we
froze.
use that big,
Kevin, turn off
Kevin,
your audio, turn off your video and talk, because you're,
the example by the bridge, if we use the example all right, so if we turn off by the bridge and all the blasting being done over there, I wonder how much of that property was exposed. It may really have been a small percentage of it,
Yeah,
and they're just getting into the weeds, so to speak, which is underneath that, layer of roots that, and debris and detritus and leaves over, a decade or more that have built up a layer, a 1 foot thin layer of soil on top of what otherwise would be exposed ledge,
yeah,
so.
I'm sure that a
Yeah.
lot of those big rocks were underground, and they're preparing for the foundation. And, I think the distinction between exposed and under, because I don't think we can prohibit blasting of underground ledge, certainly not for the primary structure. Because then we'll get into a point if we try to regulate it all and prohibit it at all, that some lots will not get built on. And we're seeing more of this, obviously, because we are now dealing with the more marginal lots that weren't developed for decades for a reason. And ledge being the reason, but, I think that thing on Cunningham Bridge is probably worse than it looks, because most of it is subterranean ledge that's being blasted away for the foundation, but.
Actually, I went by, so like this spigot, I drove by, so like 3-4 weeks ago. And I talked to them and asked them, kind of what the status is. No, we got permits for everything. And then they pointed me though to, kind of, ledge formation in the back. Where is that? But that one is really difficult to get. And I was like, are you sure you're going to blast that as well? And they said, no, we're not going to do it. And yesterday I drove by and it's absolutely everything is leveled now. Yeah. There's.
They were blasting today.
Yeah, and it's a huge amount that was absolutely visible, and I don't know how far they want to build the house. If they want to make a good point of all of this is for the primary structure, I really want to see the primary structure there. So,
I mean, admittedly, we did not do a large home, and I mean, we just did a large home thing. We didn't do it. Land alteration special permit, and again, I think this is where enforcement and applying this bylaw, is falling on us and on the building inspector, that maybe we're not doing it enough and not scrutinizing these enough, because there's also a lot of blasting going on since that bylaw has been in effect. And, I can count how many land alteration special permits we've done on one hand, probably on 2 or 3 fingers.
It really is a complicated geophysical problem that has to be designed with the professionals who actually understand the complications and also what is rate limiting factors. It's not our job. It's not a professional person who works in that area.
Well,
And we as a small town, we don't have the resources to actually design.
And maybe Cassandra, this is something we need to survey the companies we use as experts. To try, maybe say to them, look, ledge removal, blasting is becoming an increasing concern. What are your capabilities, in, measuring before and after scenarios, before, how do you measure it before so that we can properly regulate? We have a bylaw that we think is being underused, blah, blah, blah. Maybe we need to solicit what we have from our current experts. My guess is some of our solo experts aren't really qualified to do the kind of survey to, tell us how much ledge is out there and exposed before a project starts. Weston and Sampson might be able to do that, but, and maybe that's what we need to do for these kinds of projects, is just bring in the big guns and not rely on our local, solo engineers.
Well, one of the things that we have to worry about, Tom, is that our solo engineering firms have a conflict of interest.
Well, that's a whole,
Right? I mean,
that's
we're
a whole
not
different issue.
people who are 100 miles away, who are experts in an area that have no skin in the game that come in and tell us, well, this is actually geophysically what is going to be removed. It has to be removed because here's the plan, here's the space, and this is what it's going to require. We don't do that. We just listen to them tell us what they find. And that's not the same as doing an evaluation that says, we want to know exactly how this landscape is going to be changed and whether or not the consequences of it are substantial enough that we want to negotiate about how it could evolve in a way that still is going to make the person who's building the building the money they expect, but yet doesn't destroy the landscape.
Well, yeah. From the text of the bylaw, that's a slightly different issue of how we apply the bylaw and who we have apply it for us. Again, I no slam on John Hallen, but I think he needs to do a little more.
You know what? If you
You don't, part of it is you don't want to put people through a special permit process if it's not going to need one in the end of the day, but we need to have some kind of, the project at Cunningham Bridge, we only dealt with as a large home review. We should have also screened that for ledge removal in some way.
Well, we did, and you know what? When they told us what they were going to do, it did not. It's like having a three-dimensional model as opposed to having a two-dimensional model. Look at what we have: the harbor project, the beautiful physical facility for the people that are going to live there. But when we were making the negotiations with the developer, we had no idea what the scale was going to look like. We had no idea what would happen if Elm Street would be changed or not. And so we're sort of sitting ducks in a way.
Well, perhaps, I think the scale was readily knowable, but it was difficult. There was new on Zoom and that, again, water under the bridge, but it is difficult for volunteer boards to be able to deal with these things. That's a constant
But
problem.
we don't get to ask our consultants the questions we really want the answers to, which is I tried to get a three-dimensional model made, and that just, had
Well, that's because
absolutely no start.
we're spending other people's money, that's why.
Yeah, but other people are going to make massive amounts of money, and it has to be weighed in pros and con terms about how to make it so that it is something that now today people are coming to town and saying, gosh, I never thought it was going to look like that. So we, as planners, that's unfortunately our job, which is to look into the future and say, what are the problems that we can't anticipate, but we know might exist?
Well, all right. All right. So with this particular bylaw, I'd like everybody to take a close look at it and think about what changes might be necessary, not only in substance, but in procedure, in the review procedure, or what triggers a review. Maybe we have to create a process that is short of the special permit. Under the wetlands regs, there's a process called we used to call it in my day an RDA, request for determination of applicability. It was a application where you ask the Concom to make a determination if the Wetlands Act and the Wetlands Bylaw are triggered and requires the more detailed application, which is called a notice of intent. It's sort of a mandated preliminary review of something, and maybe we need to create something similar so that we don't force everybody into a special permit process that they may not need to be in, but at least we're scrutinizing it to make that call as about whether it's a special permit or not. On the large home review on Cunningham Bridge, we saw the plans. We asked them how much ledge, where were you removing the ledge? Well, for this house and for this garage and for this utility line, and we took their word for it. And we didn't ask for the special permit process to be done. Well, maybe we need to do some larger level of scrutiny that's similar to what, the two-step kind of process that Concom has. So that's just a thought. Kevin, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I'm just going to offer that we require the special permit unless the applicant can provide the technical basis for why one would not be required. And then we provide a waiver for that. We put the onus on them and their experts to provide us, the lay people, as well as our consultants that have that higher level of knowledge to evaluate whether what's coming to us is quality information or not, to determine whether something can be waived.
Yeah, so we would take the default position that anytime there's gonna be an alteration of ledge, that it's gonna require the special permit under this bylaw. But it's the burden on you applicant to disprove that. to prove
Right.
it. Yeah, okay, that's interesting thought too.
Can I
Uh,
just ask a question about that, like logistically from the admin side? Are you thinking that the proposed applicant would need to disprove prior to applying for the special permit or during the special permit process?
I think as part of the application, if the application would say, is there going to be any removal of ledge? Yes or no? If the answer is yes, please explain in full factual and engineering detail why the special permit process under section 9.1 will not be required, something of that nature.
Okay.
And again, the way to also get more control of this is one of my targets here is to get rid of some of the exemptions. I'd really like to limit this to just the primary structure and the utilities being the only exemptions. And I think we can go a long way. We don't have to sacrifice the visual uniqueness of Cohasset for somebody's swimming pool or their garage. We really shouldn't. And I think that would go.
Didn't we
along.
have an exemption for just garages, not swimming pools?
Well, here's what it says. So right here in this section that's in front of us.
It includes pools.
A special permit will be required. So yeah, the whole thing will. The exemption is going to be limited to just the house and the utility. So now it says a special permit will be required for the excavation and construction of a structure or an accessory building to the principal use, such as, but not limited to, fences, sheds, barns, patios, leather courts, attached garages, and pools. So basically everything. It should include the word driveways too.
And
Well, We never we never said that removal of ledge is not allowed. We said that if you're gonna remove it, then you have to get a special permit from the planning board. And that's different than a moratorium on ledge removal. I mean, a special
Yeah, but
permit would be, did you know, what are the alternatives? Did you look at this? Did you look at that? But we don't have a moratorium on ledge removal.
Well, but this is what we have preceding this, is that all activities involving earth removal or removal exposed.
Yeah,
ledge,
must obtain a special permit, but it doesn't say.
unless, here's the operative part. And unless it could, well,
Okay, sure.
that's
Yeah,
that now admittedly, that's added language that I've put in here, but I think practically that is what has been happening already, is that
Right.
if it's an exempt activity, we haven't been requiring the special permit to be filed at all.
Well, I mean, we probably are out of time on this one, but.
Yeah, I think we
would
just
say
need
that-
to think about the
that we don't
exemption.
have we allow ledge removal even with a special permit. It's just that we require a special permit if you're gonna remove certain size and type.
Yeah, but with a special permit, we can also deny that ledge removal.
Right, but that's a different animal than saying we have that it's not allowed or there's a moratorium on ledge removal. That's different.
Yeah, but
I don't know how it was sold to town meeting on that, but
I don't, well, I remember I remember that the poster child was to show everybody what happened on Beach Street when a driveway was blasted up the side of a ledge.
What would be great is, I think along Amy's thinking is we find some kind of like positive examples of how ledge can be preserved and say, here's, the top 10 ways that we've seen ledge be preserved, and we'd like you to follow these. And if you can, great. If you can't, then explain to us why, and if it's reasonable, we'll go along with it. That's a different approach than, we don't want you to remove any ledge ever.
Yeah, but the bylaw isn't
Does-
saying we don't want you to remove any ledge forever.
No, well, right. But that's sort of the direction you're going in. Again,
No,
I
I'm
think
just trying to
if
limit.
there's-
I'm-
along Amy's suggestion that if there were examples of how ledge was preserved and maintained, that that we can incorporate into the bylaws instead of just saying we really don't want you to remove any ledge, so figure that out.
All right. Hey, all right, so.
That's just sort of a mile high concept.
Yeah, no, the homework for tonight is to everybody take a look at this and make suggestions for our next meeting. Of,
And just ask for clarification. So like, we are just addressing the extra structure. So primary house structure is totally exempt. So they would never have to ask for a special permit for the primary structure.
no, I think if we, and I think we were advised this years ago when we first proposed it. If we go to saying, I suppose, well, we can't ban the, on an otherwise buildable lot, we can't ban the house, then we've done a regulatory taking and the town will have to pay for it.
Okay,
A lot.
but, Tom, the thing of it is, when we talk about a buildable lot, and it has underneath a foot of soil, and the rest is granite, that is not necessarily a buildable lot. The fundamental reason that we are dealing with this problem is because the more you get square footage into a structure, the more money the builder and the architect combined achieve, and that's their objective. Our objective is to try to maintain the landscape with some reason and regularity. And it's not about, we don't like them, we don't want them to do it. What we're saying is that this landscape is the way it is because it stayed this way because it was not buildable. So now you can blast
Yeah,
your way into a hole for a basement and you get another, I don't know, Clark can say what is the average, a downstairs walkout basement. But that's not our problem. Our problem is to try to maintain the integrity of the landscape of the community. That's our job. And so we don't have to feel guilty about trying to take somebody's resource away. What we have to do is create a condition so that they do the best job possible.
all right, well, what I think we can do is we can require a special permit for all situations. We can't prohibit it. We can't prohibit a house, then we've done a regulatory taking. We can probably get away with doing a special permit for everything. And now I'm thinking back, the exemptions were built in by the citizen group at the time in 2017 to get it passed, to get something passed. That's why they were put in. I don't think we need the exemptions at all. I'm trying here to compromise and say, get rid of the accessory exemptions and only the primary exemption remains. But I think we could special permit it all. But then to deny the building of a house on the special permit standard, is going to be very tough for us to justify in every case. We could do that. We could probably go in that direction if we want to, and then everything would be subject to scrutiny. At least scrutiny, whether we have enough to turn it down is a whole nother story, but.
So you're using words interchangeably and they don't need to be.
What am I doing?
Scrutiny is not scrutiny sounds like we're making a piercing view of what you're doing.
That is what our job is, Amy. We scrutinize things and make legal decisions, okay? That's our job.
Well, so if
And
we
that's what a
try to
special
figure out
permit and-
language that is acceptable within the context of the kind of standard development process,
I'm sorry.
maybe
I'm sorry if
possible
I'm
for-
using legal terminology that everybody in the development world understands, but sorry.
well, everybody, I will say that when I use the word scrutiny, that means I'm going in after you. I think you're doing something and I need to find out what it is. And that's different from saying, here are the set of standards we expect you to apply in the process of land development.
Okay.
And we list them out specifically. How many square feet, how much blasting, how much removal, all of those things. And we want to know that in advance.
Let me ask you this, would it be within our realm to approve a building but not authorize it to be on a basement, ledge removed, bedrock removed to provide a basement for the building? Could we require it to be built on top of it? So we're not denying a building, but we're just denying a basement.
Well, again, remember the focus of the regulation was what's exposed, not what's underground. So a building going on top of it is still removing the exposed thing, so it doesn't.
Yeah, but there's a right. There's a building by right. Let's say there's already a building there.
Yeah.
They could put another building on top of it where that one is and not blast the hell out of the rock that it's sitting on right now.
They would lose the ability to actually get more than the maximum height of the building by getting the basement. That's what they
Right.
would lose. They're basically getting 45 feet rather than 35 feet.
With a 10-foot basement.
That's right.
But if we were to approve it, but say no, under conditions here with the exposed rock, the building's authorized, but a basement for it is not.
Yeah, but that's not what that's not what the point of this bylaw was, is to worry about excavation of subterranean.
Right. But if we're going to modify the bylaw, we should modify the bylaw to the expectation that we're talking about.
Because that's
Shouldn't
what's
we?
happening
Shouldn't we
here.
try to
That's
figure
what's
that out?
happening. That's what's happening, like with the Cunningham Bridge. The topography of that whole
Oh.
lot is being significantly changed because of the accommodations for the basement that they're blasting part of that hill and the natural topography over there out to accommodate
Right,
and
but
put the structure on top of it.
what was there before was an empty lot that had exposed ledge on the water. One of the unique
Mhm.
characteristics of Cohasset, and the house going on top of it is still altering that thing. Whether it's
Mhm.
blasting into it, it's even sitting on top of it, it's altering it. That's the thing we're targeting, is the alteration of the viewscape that you had before of the exposed ledge.
Yeah. I guess
And
there's
well,
two different things, whether it's a
and
lot with
so-
an existing home or like in the Cunningham Bridge, that was an undeveloped lot or with no structure. So,
I mean,
There's-
I don't know if we deal with this by saying, the lot coverage that's permitted by a primary structure, is altered in the case of exposed, I don't know, it's different.
I don't think we can do this here in this
I know, but
conversation.
we have to think about this to do the
Yes,
effect.
but
The
what we
objective,
should do is get help to do it. We're imagining things now. We've got one professional geoscientist on our board, and that's helpful. But we actually have to come up with something that's based on an acceptable and determining whether or not somebody can blow apart a mountain and, a small mountain and develop it.
all right, let me think about how to approach that.
And like with trees, we should take, kind of environmental consequences into consideration as well. And experts can probably help us there, so. Nope.
The timeframe isn't going to allow for extensive study. I'm not letting this stuff go to be the typical Cohasset reaction to studying it to death. It's not rocket science, I can assure you. It's what we can legally regulate. At the end of the day, it's what we can legally recognize, right? What we can scientifically would like to regulate, it's what we can legally regulate.
I think there's two distinct scenarios though, and there's
Right.
a exposed ledge on an existing parcel with an existing structure, or exposed ledge on an undeveloped parcel. And I think those haven't been differentiated with what we have in front of us. And those are two, for this to be effective, it needs to
were- yeah.
differentiate.
Developed lots and undeveloped lots were differentiated with the clearing regulations, but not with the blasting, the ledge removal regulations. You're correct. All right, give it all some thought. Give it all some thought, and then Cassandra, our next meeting is what, the 14th?
Yes, so you have August 14th as your next meeting. You have, I'm going to put MAPC at the start of the meeting. That way they can give their presentation and answer questions, and then you can move on to your hearings.
Yeah.
You have two hearings. You have a site plan review and a large home review.
Can you give us the address to both of those locations, please?
Yep, the site plan review is 82 Border Street. You previously saw it for a subdivision, or a preliminary subdivision, I should say. And then the other one is 9 Linden Circle. That's for the large home review.
All right, then for the 14th, we'll discuss this particular bylaw further. The 28th, we right now do not have anything on the agenda. Plan on the 28th that will discuss the last 3 bylaws. So have your thoughts and ideas and suggested changes and edits.
So
to
Tom,
the-
in the meantime, about the land alteration, we've sort of talked out what we feel about the problem. We need to have more information. We need to know what's possible. And we don't have it on the table
What
right.
do you need, Amy?
I
What
need,
information
I
are you
need, I
possibly
need to
lacking?
know, I need to know there is a model land alteration policy. I need to know whether or not it is legitimate to ask the questions and try to formulate a policy like we're trying to do. I don't want to shoot from my hip if it's not possible.
The traditional land alteration bylaw is the old earth removal bylaw we had that towns passed in the 60s. There are, I remember from first putting this together 15 years ago, no, more than that, 20 years ago, that nobody has this because nobody has ledge like we do. All right,
Well, that's totally not true, Tom. Situate has ledge like we do. What we need.
They don't have a bylaw that protects it.
We need a baseline understanding of how this physical form is being addressed in other communities. We don't have that.
And I'm telling you, it's not, okay? Take that as an answer. And sometimes a community that has this unique situation has to protect itself and be a groundbreaker, okay? That's what we're doing. And that's what
It's
we.
like the large house review. We come up upon
I can
that.
count on one hand how many towns have large house review.
Actually, I think you are actually completely mistaken, because when we were dealing with it originally, I looked it up myself and there were plenty of places that were discussing. I mean, way more than 4. You held up 4 fingers. Maybe you meant to hold up 40.
All right. All right, we're talked out of this tonight, so your homework is to look at the other RPB 4, 7, well, it should be 6, 7, and 8, not 7, 8, and 9. I misnumbered them, but look at the rest of them. The thing about the cluster development bylaw, there's also something out there called a low impact development model bylaw. I've glanced at it, I haven't read it in detail. I don't know if it's something additional to the cluster bylaw or a replacement for the cluster bylaw. Cluster bylaw is another one we never use because we never have we don't have any more large subdivisions, so. If anyone else would like to take a look at that model bylaw, I think if you just Google low impact development, it'll come up under the Commonwealth. Somebody has it.
I think our cluster bylaw is sort of a different animal than low impact development.
Yeah,
mean,
it might be. I
It's an
haven't
overly
compared it.
simplistic way to divide land.
Yeah, I haven't compared the two, but it's been on the radar to look at that as possibly bringing that into that concept of low impact development into the bylaw.
Right, and a part of it that's really exciting is you, as you alluded to with the density bonus, if a developer does a subdivision that's low impact development, maybe there's a bonus to that. In the past, I think we've talked about if 80% of the houses in the subdivision have south-facing slope suitable for photovoltaics, then you could have some kind of bonus density. In that now we have a new energy code that requires that we as architects design solar ready houses. If the developer, in creating pieces of pie and lines on the land, don't take into account what faces south and the garages are all facing south or whatever, then that destroys the potential energy of any particular site.
Yeah, okay. Do you want to take a look at that model bylaw too?
I don't know. I might be able to get a minute someday.
All right. Anybody else? I'll find it and can circulate it, and anybody else can look at it, because I'm pressed on time myself, so. All right, entertain a motion to adjourn. I think this was helpful.
So moved. Second.
Second,
All right, all in favor? Roll call.
Clark Brewer, aye.
Tom Callahan, aye.
Amy Glassmeyer, aye.
Kevin Heiden, aye.
Birgit Schmidt, hi.
Okay. Thank you all for being there. Thank you, Cassandra.
Good night.
See you
Good
in a
night.
couple of
Thank you.
weeks.
Bye.